that's how the fight began for the Ricketts Point Sanctuary all those years ago, I think right throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yep. That started because I couldn't teach the lessons that I was used to teaching on the rock platform, for example, because I couldn't find the animals that were key players in the story I was telling of the sea life on the platform. And so gradually what we had happening was a diminution of the number of animals, and in some cases some species seemed to disappear altogether. And so I started to jump up and down about this, mainly because I couldn't do my work. It was my job, just like if you went to your office or your factory and those factories had locked doors, or that some of the offices were locked and you couldn't get in. That's more accurate. So there were some things that I just couldn't do. It was a gradual process of depletion and degradation, and it happened mainly because of the poaching of marine life. I'd say in essence the problem was that in those days I was a one-man band, and I was like a pea shooter against a Sherman tank. Anything I did or said just bounced off, didn't carry any punch or weight, wasn't effective. I mean, people were aware. I'd say that it raised awareness, but it wasn't until I said we ought to have a total ban on shellfish poaching or taking, that the local Member of Parliament, Murray Thompson, came up and said, I believe what you're saying is right. We should have a total ban. There should be protection. I'll walk you down the corridors of power and you do the marine bit. And I did, and we started to get somewhere. It was a long battle, and the further it went, the more people came on board. And that included such people as the Greens, the Victorian National Parks Association, the local council, conservation groups along the coast, and so on. And towards the end, there were so many people on board that they all started fighting against themselves, you know. And all the time through these various steps in the campaign, in all of those processes, what I found was that each year the marine life was diminishing, and the need to have something done became increasingly pressing, until it was desperate. And all I had was a mass of fighting people. Acrimonious arguments in Parliament went on from month to month to month, and so on. One political party against another political party, and in the end I thought, you know, they're really now into it for personal kudos or party kudos, and it became party politics rather than concern. And I concerned over the shellfish and so on.
That long fight finally lead to success in the end, Bob?
It did. Yeah. In the end, the parties went back to their drawing boards. They realised that they were going to have to compromise. So the Liberals compromised. I'll tell you one party that didn't help at all, and that was the National Party. And they did not want marine sanctuaries and marine national parks at all. And I suppose that's understandable. They represented the country community. They did a lot more fishing per person than what happened in the city population, although there were a lot of fishermen in the city too. So I suppose that was understandable. But gee, every year this political grind continued, the problem worsened. And my blood pressure went up against the hair.
How many years were you fighting before it was declared a sanctuary in 2002?
It was 16 years.
Well, with that behind you, Bob, where to now? What are you looking for in the future?
Yeah. One hopes that we'll have a return of some of the vibrancy and variety, diversity, if you like, of sea life on the shore platforms and on the near shore reefs. Because if you go out, you won't find such depletion. The problems are nowhere near as bad. In fact, in some cases, as Mike Letch observes, it is good getting better and just lovely out there. But where it was intensively affected, those species, many of those species have disappeared. Predatory shellfish, for instance, many of the crabs, sea stars and so on, those species have disappeared or are very, very seldom seen. Hermit crabs is a case in point, one my little daughter used to love. Well, that used to be an iconic species for Ricketts Point and said to be, this is not true, but it was said to be the only place in Port Phillip Bay where you've got the hermit crab. Well, a couple of other places, one up near the heads, down Mornington and so on. So it's not quite right, but I mean they weren't all that common, and so they are a case in point of a species that you just don't see now. No, I haven't seen one since 1989. That's a long time. They have been seen occasionally, but I don't think those. You can't start a new species off with a couple of adults, a male and a female. You've got to have a big population, so it's hard to keep going again. Once they've gone, it's going to take an awful long time to get that species up to a minimum level where it's self-sustaining. I could go into chapter and verse about how the species get to a level, descend to a level numerically where they can no longer sustain themselves. But we are in that phase where we are losing a lot of species. That's my opinion.
Well, with that behind you, Bob, did it finally work out successfully after all that effort?
Well, yeah, sure. Given what I said, that it's going to take a long time, if at all, that we have a return of all of the species that we lost, or substantially the return of those species, it's going to take a long time. But we're not doing anything much now to harm the species that we've got left, and we're leaving the door open for any species that likes to float by and have its gametes, its ovum or its sperm, join together and drop down on a bit of start spreading a little colony. We're open to that because it's protected, and those species have got every opportunity to re-establish themselves if we can get enough of them in a given area to sustain themselves. And you do need a certain minimum population in order to do that.